The chandelier above the mahogany table cast shadows that danced across 24 faces, each one wearing a different mask of anticipation. But none of them were looking at me. Not yet. I sat at the far end, the seat closest to the kitchen door, the spot reserved for the family disappointment. The seat I had occupied at every major gathering for the past 15 years. My mother, Victoria Ashford, sat at the opposite end in her throne-like chair, her diamond necklace catching the light with every calculated breath. My father, Richard, stood behind her, one hand possessively on her shoulder, surveying his kingdom of children, grandchildren, and carefully selected guests. My older brother, James, sat to their right, his wife Miranda beside him, both wearing expressions of smug satisfaction. My sister Catherine occupied the left side, her husband David whispering something that made her laugh. That particular laugh she reserved for moments when she felt superior. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary. But I knew better. We all did. This was the dinner, the one where everything would be decided. It's the one where the future of Ashford Industries, the manufacturing empire my grandfather had built from nothing, would be laid out like a feast before the worthy. And I was not among the worthy. I watched my father clear his throat, the sound cutting through the polite conversation like a knife. Everyone fell silent. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. My name is Marcus Ashford, and this is the story of how I lost everything, built it back in secret, and then burned their world down with a smile on my face. But to understand what happened that night, you need to understand how I got there. You need to know about the 23 years that came before, the years that shaped me into someone capable of what I was about to do. I was born the youngest of 3 children, 7 years after Catherine, 9 years after James. My arrival was not celebrated. My mother had wanted to be done with childbearing. My father had wanted a backup heir, insurance, in case something happened to James. What they got was me, a child who didn't fit the Ashford mold from the very beginning. James was the golden child, the one who inherited my father's sharp business mind and my mother's ruthless charm. By the time he was 16, he was already sitting in on board meetings, learning the intricacies of corporate warfare. Catherine was the socialite, the one who married into the right family, who knew how to leverage connections and throw parties that made the society pages. And then there was me. I was the one who asked too many questions. It's the one who wanted to know why we had so much when others had so little. It's the one who suggested at the tender age of 12 that maybe Ashford Industries should invest in better working conditions for its factory employees instead of buying a third vacation home. Our father's response was to laugh. Our mother's was to send me to my room without dinner. James and Catherine learned quickly that mocking me was the fastest way to earn parental approval. By the time I turned 18, I had learned to keep my mouth shut. But the damage was done. I was the soft one, the weak link. The Ashford who didn't have what it took to run an empire built on cutting corners and maximizing profits at any cost. College was my escape. I went to State University instead of the Ivy League schools my siblings had attended. My parents didn't argue. The farther away I was, the less I reminded them of their disappointment. I studied business, not because I wanted to join the family company, but because I wanted to understand how companies could be run differently, ethically, successfully. It was there I met Daniel Park, a computer science major with dreams of revolutionizing manufacturing through automation and artificial intelligence. We became roommates, then best friends, then eventually business partners. Daniel saw something in me that my family never had: potential. We started small, a consulting firm that helped mid-sized manufacturers optimize their operations using new technology. We worked out of my apartment, lived on ramen and coffee, and slowly built a client base. My family knew nothing about it. I had stopped going home for holidays after my sophomore year. They didn't notice. Or if they did, they didn't care. By the time I was 25, our little consulting firm had grown into something more. We had developed proprietary software that could reduce manufacturing waste by 40% while improving worker safety. We had 12 employees and clients across 3 states. We called it Meridian Solutions. My family still didn't know I existed beyond the occasional obligatory birthday card my mother's assistant sent. Then, when I was 27, my grandfather died. Harold Ashford, the founder of Ashford Industries, the man who had built the company from a single machine shop into a manufacturing powerhouse worth hundreds of millions. I had loved him once, before I understood what his empire was built on. He had been kind to me when I was small, in a distant, preoccupied way. I went to the funeral. It was the first time I had seen my family in 5 years. James was 36 now, already serving as chief operating officer. He had his father's steel-gray eyes and had perfected the art of looking through people as if they didn't exist. Catherine was 34, dripping in designer everything, her 2 children perfectly coiffed and silent beside her. My parents looked older, harder, more like the marble statues in their foyer than actual human beings. They greeted me with the warmth reserved for distant acquaintances. James asked what I was doing with my life, said consulting. He smirked, and said that was nice, that someone had to serve the companies that actually mattered. Catherine asked if I was seeing anyone. I said no. She said that was probably for the best, that I should focus on getting stable first. My father said nothing to me at all. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. I didn't plan to attend. What would be the point? But then my grandfather's lawyer, a man named Thomas Brennan, who had known me since childhood, called me personally. He said I needed to be there, that Harold had specifically requested my presence. So I went. The reading was held in the library of my parents' estate, the same room where my grandfather used to read me stories when I was 5 years old, before he got too busy building his empire to notice his youngest grandson. Thomas opened the will with the standard legal language, then got to the distributions. To Victoria and Richard, the estate in Connecticut and a substantial trust. To James, the position of chief executive officer and 40% of company shares. To Catherine, the property in Manhattan and 20% of company shares. To Marcus, $50,000 in a letter. The room was silent for exactly 3 seconds before James laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound, like a gunshot in the quiet library. I said 50,000, he said. For the family disappointment? That's generous, really. It's more than you deserve. Catherine joined in, her laugh higher, more musical, more cruel. Well, she said, at least now you can afford a nicer apartment. Do you still live in that terrible neighborhood? My mother looked at me with something that might have been pity if she were capable of such an emotion. My father looked at his watch. Thomas handed me the envelope containing the letter. I took it and left without saying a word. I read it that night, alone in my apartment, the one Catherine had mocked, the apartment I shared with Daniel, where we had built something real. The letter was short. Hey, Marcus, it read in my grandfather's careful handwriting. Oh, I know I have failed you. I built an empire, but I lost sight of what empires are for. Your father and siblings are equipped to run Ashford Industries. They have the ruthlessness, the hunger, the willingness to do what is necessary to compete in this industry. You do not, and I mean that as the highest compliment I can give. You are better than this company deserves. Oh, you see what I stopped seeing 40 years ago? That businesses should serve people, not the other way around. The money I left you is not an insult. It is seed capital. Build something better than I did. Show them that success and integrity are not mutually exclusive. And when you do, when you have built something that makes you proud, come back. Show them what real power looks like. I cried for the first time since I was a child. Not because of the money, but because someone in my family had finally seen me. The next morning I called Daniel, showed him the letter. We looked at each other across our cheap coffee table, surrounded by the servers and equipment that ran our growing company, and we made a decision. We were going to build something extraordinary, and we were going to do it the right way. The next 8 years were a blur of work, risk, and calculated moves. We took my grandfather's $50,000 and combined it with every dollar we had saved. We brought on investors who believed in our vision of ethical manufacturing. We expanded our software platform, adding modules for supply chain transparency, worker safety monitoring, and environmental impact tracking. We poached the best engineers, the ones who were tired of building systems designed to exploit rather than empower. We offered them equity, creative freedom, and the chance to work on technology that mattered. Meridian Solutions grew. First to 50 employees, then 100, then 500. We worked with manufacturers who wanted to modernize, who understood that the future of industry wasn't about squeezing every penny from workers and the environment, but about building sustainable, efficient, profitable operations that people could be proud of. We developed artificial intelligence systems that could optimize entire production lines, reducing waste, improving quality, and yes, replacing some human jobs, but we paired that with retraining programs with transition assistance, with a commitment to help displaced workers find new roles. It cost us more in the short term. It built loyalty and reputation that money couldn't buy. By the time I turned 33, Meridian Solutions was valued at $200 million. We had offices in 8 states. Our client list included some of the most respected manufacturers in the country. My family still didn't know. I had changed my last name on all business documents to my mother's maiden name, Sterling. Marcus Sterling, CEO of Meridian Solutions. I kept a low profile, let Daniel be the public face of the company. I had learned from my family that sometimes the most powerful position is the one nobody sees coming. And I watched. Oh, how I watched. Ashford Industries was struggling. My father's health was declining. James had taken over as CEO 3 years earlier, and he was running the company exactly how our grandfather had, exactly how our father had taught him. Cut costs, maximize profits, fight unions, lobby against regulations. It had worked for decades, but the world was changing. Their clients were leaving, moving to competitors who could offer better technology, better efficiency, better public relations. Younger companies like mine, that understood the market was shifting toward transparency and sustainability. James tried to adapt, but he didn't understand the technology. He hired consultants who charged millions and delivered systems that didn't integrate with their aging infrastructure. He fought with his engineers, pushed out anyone who questioned his decisions. The company was bleeding market share, bleeding talent, bleeding money. Catherine, serving on the board as a major shareholder, was no help. She understood society parties, not supply chains. She voted however James told her to vote, more concerned with maintaining her lifestyle than actually understanding the business. My parents, technically retired but still influential, watched their legacy crumble and blamed everyone except themselves and their chosen successors. I waited. I built relationships with their largest clients, the ones I knew were unhappy. I didn't poach them, not yet. I just let them know that Meridian Solutions existed, that we had solutions to the problems Ashford Industries couldn't solve. I cultivated relationships with their shareholders, the institutional investors who were watching the stock price decline quarter after quarter. I attended industry conferences, made sure the right people knew who Marcus Sterling was and what his company could do. I waited for the right moment. It came on a Tuesday in November, 8 years after my grandfather's funeral. Daniel called me into his office with a look I had learned to recognize. He had found something. Ashford Industries was going to lose their biggest client, his titanium manufacturing group. The account represented 23% of their annual revenue. TMG's CEO, Patricia Chen, had sent a letter informing them that she was looking for a new supplier and systems integrator, someone who could modernize their operation and improve their sustainability metrics. James had responded by offering a discount. He still didn't understand that this wasn't about price. It was about capability. I picked up the phone and called Patricia. We had met at several industry events. She knew Meridian Solutions. She knew what we could do. 3 weeks later, TMG signed with us. Contract was worth $42 million over 3 years. Ashford Industries stock dropped 9% in a single day. That was the beginning. Over the next 6 months, I systematically contacted every major Ashford client who had expressed any level of dissatisfaction. I didn't badmouth the company. I didn't have to. I just showed them what we could offer. Better technology, better integration, better results. The stock dropped to half its previous value. James was panicking. I knew because I still had one contact inside the company, Ellen Rodriguez, a senior engineer who had tried to warn James about their technological shortcomings and been ignored. Not because she was disloyal, but because she was tired of watching a once great company destroy itself through arrogance. He's talking about selling, she told me over coffee one morning. The board is pushing for it. Your parents are against it, but they don't have enough shares to block it anymore. Catherine will vote, however, ensures she gets the most money. James is looking at offers. I asked her who was interested. 3 private equity firms, she said. All of them plan to strip it for parts. Sell the real estate, liquidate the equipment, lay off 90% of the workforce. There's nothing left to save, Marcus. Your grandfather's company is going to be carved up and sold for scrap. Unless I said, she looked at me. Unless what? Unless someone made a better offer? Someone who wanted to save it, not destroy it? She laughed. Who would do that? The company's a mess. It would take years and hundreds of millions to turn it around. I smiled. Someone with the capital, the technology, and the knowledge of exactly what went wrong and how to fix it. It took her a moment. Then her eyes went wide. You, she whispered. You want to buy Ashford Industries? I want to save it, I corrected. And yes, destroy them in the process. I spent the next month assembling the pieces. Meridian Solutions couldn't buy Ashford Industries outright. We weren't big enough. But I had spent 8 years building relationships with investors, with other companies, with people who believed in what we were doing. I created a consortium. It's 5 companies, including Meridian, each bringing capital and expertise. Together, we had the resources to make an offer that the board couldn't refuse. I brought the proposal to James myself, not as Marcus Sashford, but as Marcus Sterling, CEO of Meridian Solutions, representing a group of investors interested in acquiring Ashford Industries. The meeting was held in the same conference room where I had watched my father teach James the business 20 years earlier. James sat at the head of the table, older now, tired, the golden boy tarnish showing through. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? I was just another corporate raider trying to pick the bones of his dying company. Mr. Sterling, he said, reviewing the offer, this is a generous proposal. More than we expected given our current situation. I kept my voice neutral. We believe the company has good bones. It needs new leadership, new technology, new direction, but the foundation is solid. He looked at me with something like gratitude. That's what my grandfather used to say, good bones. I smiled. I know. Something flickered in his eyes, but he couldn't place it. He agreed to present the offer to the board. I left with a handshake, knowing that in 2 weeks everything would change. The board meeting was scheduled for the Monday before Thanksgiving. It's the same week my parents had chosen for their 40th anniversary dinner. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. The board voted on Thursday, 7-2, in favor of accepting our consortium's offer. My parents voted against it, but James and Catherine voted yes, choosing financial security over family legacy. The deal was structured as a stock purchase. We would own 75% of the company. The family would retain 25% but have no operational control. James would step down as CEO. I would take his place, but they still didn't know who I was. The announcement was scheduled for Monday after the holiday weekend. After the anniversary dinner, I accepted the invitation to the dinner. It came via my mother's assistant, a formal card to Marcus Ashford. They had found me somehow, probably through the funeral home database from my grandfather's service. The invitation said my presence was requested at a family celebration. Nothing more. IRSVP? Yes. I arrived at 7, exactly on time. The house looked the same as it always had, a monument to wealth and taste, and the careful curation of appearances. The same butler who had worked for my parents for 30 years opened the door. He looked at me, and I saw recognition flicker across his face. Mr. Marcus, he said quietly. Welcome home, thank you, Robert, I replied. It's been a long time. The dining room was full. James and Miranda with their 3 children. Catherine and David with their 2. My parents at the head of the table. Various cousins, aunts, uncles, the extended Ashford clan gathered for the milestone. And me, directed to the seat by the kitchen door. They made small talk as dinner was served. Catherine asked about my life with the tone of someone asking a child about their imaginary friend. I said I was doing well, that I worked in consulting. James said he had just closed a deal to sell the family business. Said it with the air of someone who had made a difficult but necessary choice. I congratulated him, asked who bought it. Consortium, he said. Led by some tech company. Meridian, something. They're going to try to modernize the operation. Good luck to them. I took a sip of wine. Meridian Solutions, I said. I've heard they're quite good. He shrugged. We'll see. I made sure the deal protected the family's interests. We retain a significant stake, and I secured a consulting role for myself. Of course, I said. Dinner proceeded. The usual Ashford performance of wealth and success. My mother held court telling stories about their early years. My father nodded along, looking frailer than I remembered, but still commanding in his silence. Then, as dessert was being served, my father stood. The table fell silent. He thanked everyone for coming, spoke about 40 years of marriage, of building a family and a legacy, spoke about being proud of his children, his voice pointedly singular when he mentioned James's business acumen and Catherine's social graces. He did not mention me. Then my mother stood. She had an announcement, she said. They had finalized their estate planning. Given the sale of the company, given their ages, they wanted to ensure everyone knew where things stood. James would receive the majority of the remaining assets. The houses, the art collection, the investment portfolio. Catherine would receive a substantial trust in the property in Manhattan. The grandchildren would have education funds and trust distributions at 25 and 30. She paused, looking down the table at me. Marcus, she said, and the way she said my name made it clear what was coming. You have already received your inheritance, the $50,000 from your grandfather. We believe that is more than sufficient. You will not receive anything additional from our estate. Not the property, not the investments, not even $1. The table was silent. I could feel their eyes on me. Catherine looking almost sympathetic, but not quite. My father watching to see how I would react. I set down my fork carefully, took a sip of water, let the moment stretch. Then I smiled. I see, I said. Well, I suppose I should tell you all something. My mother frowned. Tell us what, Marcus? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a document. The acquisition agreement, signed and finalized that afternoon. I slid it down the table to my father. I should tell you that I won't need your inheritance, I said, because I just bought something that makes it completely irrelevant. My father picked up the document, his hands shaking slightly. He began to read. I watched the color drain from his face. I bought Ashford Industries, I continued, my voice calm, conversational. Well, technically a consortium, I assembled, bought it. But I control the consortium. I'm the majority stakeholder. And as of Monday morning, I will be the chief executive officer. James grabbed the document from our father. His eyes scanned the page, then locked on the signature line. Marcus Sterling. It read, CEO Meridian Solutions. Sterling, he said. You changed your name. My mother's maiden name, I confirmed. I found that operating under the Ashford name came with certain disadvantages. People made assumptions about who I was, what I was capable of. Much easier to build something real when you're not carrying that particular burden. Catherine was looking between me and the document like she couldn't quite process what was happening. You, she said. You're the tech company that bought us out. Meridian Solutions, I said. We're not just a tech company. We're a comprehensive manufacturing solutions firm with proprietary AI-driven systems. A client base that includes 12 of the top 20 manufacturers in the country, and a valuation that, as of last quarter, exceeded $300 million. We've been growing steadily for 8 years while you've been watching Ashford Industries crumble. The room erupted. James demanding to know how I could do this, Catherine asking if this was even legal, my mother's face frozen in an expression of pure shock. Only my father remained silent, staring at the document like it was a death certificate, which, in a way, it was. I held up my hand. The room quieted. Let me be clear about what happens now, I said. As of Monday, I control Ashford Industries. James, your consulting role is terminated. You were never good at the actual work anyway, just at taking credit for other people's ideas. Catherine, your board seat is gone. You can keep your shares, but you'll have no vote, no influence, no say in how the company is run. I turned to my parents, and you too. You can keep your 25% stake. Watch as I turn the company grandfather built, the company you corrupted with your greed and short-sightedness, into something he actually would have been proud of. Or you can sell your shares back to me at current market value, which, thanks to James's incompetence, is about 40% of what they were worth 5 years ago. Your choice. My father found his voice. You can't do this, he said. The family has always controlled Ashford Industries. Always. I stood, buttoning my jacket. The family still controls 25%. The rest is owned by people who actually understand manufacturing, technology, and how to run a business in the 21st century. People who believe that companies should serve their employees, their communities, and their customers, not just enrich their executives. But you, James said, his voice desperate. Your family. You can't just take everything we built. I laughed. Everything you built? You built nothing. Grandfather built it, then father maintained it. Then you ran it into the ground, while refusing to listen to anyone who suggested there might be a better way. I didn't take anything from you, James. You gave it away through your own incompetence. Just made sure it went to someone who would fix it instead of strip it for parts. I walked toward the door. Robert was standing there, holding my coat. As I took it from him, he whispered, "Good for you, Mr. Marcus." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the table. 24 faces, all looking at me with various expressions of shock, anger, and dawning realization. "You know what the saddest part is?" I said. "If you had just treated me like I mattered, even a little bit, I might have helped you save the company instead of buying it out from under you. If you had believed in me, supported me, or even just acknowledged my existence, I might have brought Meridian's technology to Ashford Industries as a partnership instead of a takeover. But you didn't. You mocked me. You dismissed me. You told me tonight that I would get nothing, not even $1. I smiled. So I made sure that was true. I don't need your money. I never did. I built my own empire the right way, with integrity and innovation and a belief that businesses can be both profitable and ethical. And now I own yours. I left then, walked out of that house for what I knew would be the last time as a guest. I could hear the shouting behind me as the door closed. James yelling, Catherine crying, my mother demanding someone do something, my father silent, probably calculating the exact dollar amount of what they had lost. The next morning I woke up in my apartment, the one Catherine had mocked. Daniel was already up, coffee brewing, looking at his laptop. "The announcement went out an hour ago," he said. "The business press is going crazy. Nobody saw it coming." I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat beside him. "Let me see." He turned the screen. The headline on the Wall Street Journal read, "Mystery Tech Firm Acquires Struggling Ashford Industries in $200 million Deal." The article detailed the acquisition, the consortium of investors. The plan to modernize and integrate Ashford Industries with Meridian's technology platform. It quoted industry analysts who said the move was brilliant, that Ashford had been circling the drain, and this might be the only thing that could save it. And buried in the fourth paragraph, a detail that some enterprising journalist had uncovered, Marcus Sterling, CEO of Meridian Solutions, an architect of the acquisition, had changed his name from Marcus Ashford 8 years prior. My phone started ringing. Reporters mostly. Some congratulatory calls from investors and partners. A few angry voicemails from family members I barely knew. And one from Ellen Rodriguez, the engineer who had kept me informed. I answered. "I just heard," she said. She was laughing. "I knew you were planning something, but this. Marcus, this is beautiful." "How are people reacting there?" I asked. "Chaos," she said. "James showed up an hour ago and tried to clean out his office. Security had to escort him out. Half the executive team is updating their resumes. The other half is hoping you'll keep them on." "Will you stay?" I asked. "Going to need people who know the operation, who care about doing things right." There was a pause. I said then, "Yes. Absolutely yes. I've been waiting 8 years for someone to actually fix this place." "Good," I said, "because we have a lot of work to do." The first Monday morning as CEO of Ashford Industries, I arrived at 7. The building was the same one my grandfather had built in 1978, expanded and renovated over the decades, but still fundamentally the same structure. I had spent summers here as a child, before they decided I wasn't worth the effort. I walked through the lobby, past the portrait of my grandfather that had hung there for 30 years. I stopped and looked at it. The artist had captured something in his eyes, a mix of pride and regret that I hadn't understood as a child. "I understand now," I said quietly. "I understand what you were trying to tell me." My office, James's former office, was on the top floor. Corner suite with windows overlooking the factory floor. I stood at those windows and watched the morning shift arrive. 243 employees who had survived the company's decline through layoffs and cost-cutting. People who came to work every day wondering if this would be the day they lost their jobs. I had a plan to change that. The executive team meeting was scheduled for 9. I had asked everyone to stay on for at least 30 days while we completed the transition. Most had agreed, probably out of curiosity more than anything else. They filed in at 8:55, 12 executives, all of them older than me, all of them watching me with various degrees of skepticism and concern. I stood at the head of the table, the same table where my father had taught James to run the company. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "I know this transition has been abrupt and probably unsettling. I want to be direct with you about what's going to happen." I pulled up a presentation on the screen behind me. The first slide showed Meridian Solutions logo next to Ashford Industries logo, with an arrow between them labeled Integration Plan. Over the next 18 months, we're going to completely modernize this operation. We're going to implement Meridian's AI-driven systems across the entire production line. We're going to upgrade our equipment, improve our safety protocols, and rebuild our client relationships. This will not be easy. It will require every person in this room to work harder than they ever have. But if you stay, if you commit to this vision, I can promise you 3 things. I advanced to the next slide. 3 bullet points. 1. Job security, no layoffs. In fact, we're going to hire an additional 100 employees over the next 2 years. 2. Profit sharing. Every employee, from the factory floor to this executive team, will receive equity in the new company structure. When we succeed, everyone succeeds. 3. Purpose. We're going to build a company that proves you can be profitable, ethical, and industry-leading all at the same time. I looked around the table. You can leave if you want. I'll provide generous severance packages, excellent references, no hard feelings. Or you can stay and be part of building something that matters. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Ellen Rodriguez spoke up. "I'm in," she said. "I've been waiting for someone to actually listen. Let's do this." One by one, the others nodded. Some enthusiastic, some cautious, but all of them agreeing to give it a try. The work began immediately. We brought in Meridian's engineers to assess every system. We interviewed every employee to understand the problems they saw every day, the inefficiencies they dealt with, the dangers they navigated. We listened to the people who actually did the work, instead of assuming we knew better. Found problems everywhere. Equipment that should have been replaced years ago. Safety protocols that existed on paper but weren't enforced. Quality control processes that had been streamlined to the point of uselessness. A culture of fear where employees were afraid to report issues because it might cost them their jobs. It took 6 months just to stabilize everything. 6 months of 18-hour days, of finding problems faster than we could fix them, of wondering if we had taken on something too broken to save. But slowly, things began to change. We implemented the new AI systems module by module, training employees instead of replacing them. The production line supervisor who had worked there for 20 years became our most valuable asset, combining his expertise with our technology to optimize processes in ways our engineers never would have thought of. We replaced the dangerous equipment and upgraded the facility. We brought in safety consultants and actually implemented their recommendations, instead of just filing them away. The injury rate dropped by 60% in the first year. We started winning back clients. The ones who had left for competitors, who had been watching to see if the new Ashford Industries was real or just more corporate promises. We showed them results. Better quality, faster turnaround, transparent supply chains. The stock price began to climb. My family watched from the sidelines. They still owned their 25%, now worth twice what it had been when we took over. James tried to take credit in a few industry publications, claiming he had laid the groundwork for the turnaround. I let him. His credibility was already shot, and correcting him would just give him more attention. Catherine sent me an email after the first year. It was brief. "You were right," it said. "I'm sorry we never saw it." I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late. My parents sold their shares after 18 months. They got market value, which meant they made a substantial profit on top of everything else they had. They didn't say thank you. I didn't expect them to. The final board meeting where they signed over their shares was held in the same library where my grandfather Eswell had been read. My father looked older, diminished.
Ow.
My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. As they were leaving, my father paused at the door. "He would have been proud," he said quietly. "Your grandfather." I looked at him, this man who had never seen me, never valued me, never imagined I could build something greater than what he had inherited. "I know," I said. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was simply acknowledgement that he finally understood what he had lost when he chose to mock instead of mentor. to dismiss instead of develop, to measure worth in obedience rather than ability. He left. I never saw him again. 5 years after the acquisition, Ashford Industries was unrecognizable. We had tripled our workforce, quadrupled our revenue, and become the industry leader in sustainable manufacturing. Companies came to us not just for our technology, but for our approach, our culture, our proof that doing the right thing could also be the profitable thing. Meridian Solutions had grown alongside it, the two companies symbiotically driving each other forward. We had taken the model we proved at Ashford and scaled it across the industry. I stood in my office, the one that used to be James's, looking out at a factory floor that now employed over 700 people. People who had health care, retirement plans, profit sharing, and the dignity of working for a company that valued them. My phone rang. "Daniel, just got the final numbers for the quarter," he said. "You sitting down?" I laughed. "Just tell me." "Combined valuation of Meridian and Ashford just crossed $1.2 billion, he said. "We're officially a unicorn." I closed my eyes. Thought about the $50,000 my grandfather had left me, the seed capital that had started everything. "He knew," I said. "Somehow he knew that you'd build this. That I'd need to be cut out to become who I was meant to be. That the rejection would fuel me in ways that acceptance never could." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Then are you going to tell them? Your family?" I thought about it. Imagined calling James, Catherine, my parents. Imagined telling them that the disappointment they had mocked at that dinner table was now worth more than everything they had combined. But what would be the point? They knew. The business press made sure of that. Every article about Meridian Solutions' success, every profile of Ashford Industries' turnaround mentioned my name. Marcus Sterling, formerly Marcus Ashford, the youngest son who built an empire while his family watched theirs crumble. "No," I said. "Let them read about it in the Wall Street Journal, like everyone else." I hung up and turned back to the window. Below me, the second shift was arriving. I watched them badge in, greet each other, head to their stations. People who counted on the decisions I made, who trusted that I would keep building something worth being part of. That's what they had never understood. My family. That real power isn't about how much you can take from others. It's about how much you can create for others. They had mocked me at that dinner table, told me I would get nothing, not even $1. They were right, in a way. I didn't get their money. I didn't want it. I built something better. I built a company that proved my grandfather's final lesson, that success and integrity are not mutually exclusive. I built a team of thousands who came to work every day knowing their contributions mattered. I built wealth, yes, but I also built meaning. And I did it all without them. The dinner where they told me I was worth nothing was 5 years ago. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. I keep the invitation in my desk drawer. Not as a reminder of the pain, but as a reminder of the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped waiting for their approval and started building my own legacy. Last month, I got a letter from James. He's working as a consultant now, helping struggling companies with restructuring. The irony is not lost on me. In the letter, he asked if there might be opportunities at Ashford Industries. Said he had learned a lot, grown, understood where he had gone wrong. I wrote back, thanked him for reaching out, told him that we did have opportunities for experienced consultants. But they went through the same rigorous interview process as every other candidate. No family favors, no special treatment. Haven't heard back. I don't expect to. Catherine reached out too, in her way. She started a foundation focus on business education for underprivileged youth. Asked if I would serve on the advisory board. I said yes. Not for her, but for the kids who might be like me. The ones who don't fit the mold, who ask too many questions, who care about things beyond profit margins. Maybe we can save them some of the pain I went through. Maybe we can show them that being different isn't a weakness. It's a superpower, if you know how to channel it. My parents haven't reached out. I don't expect them to. We exist in the same world now, moving in the same circles, attending the same industry events. We're polite when we cross paths, distant, like acquaintances who once knew each other in another life. And that's fine. I don't need their validation anymore. I stopped needing it the moment I walked out of that dinner. But I do think about that night sometimes. About the moment my mother told me I would get nothing, about the satisfaction on James's face, about Catherine's false sympathy. about my father's indifference. I think about how I smiled, how I reached into my pocket and pulled out the document that would change everything. And I think about the look on their faces when they realized that the family disappointment had just bought their company out from under them. That memory, more than any of the success that followed, more than the billion-dollar valuation or the industry awards or the business school case studies written about our turnaround, that memory is what I treasure most. Not because of revenge. Revenge is hollow, empty, a poison you drink hoping the other person will die. No, I treasure it because it was the moment I finally saw myself clearly. Not through their eyes, not through society's expectations, not through anyone's judgment but my own. I saw a man who had built something real, who had turned $50,000 in a letter from his grandfather into an empire that employed thousands and proved that business could be a force for good. I saw a man who had been told he was nothing and had responded by becoming everything they said he couldn't be. I saw a man who had lost his family and found something better, purpose, integrity, and the knowledge that he had built his success on his own terms. The story could end there. The triumphant conclusion. The ultimate revenge. The family fortune reversed. The prodigal son returned as the conquering hero. But life isn't a story. It's messier than that. More complicated. Because here's the thing they do and tell you about winning. It doesn't feel the way you think it will. I thought that buying the company, that proving them wrong, would fill the hole their rejection had created. And for a while, it did. The satisfaction of walking out of that dinner, of seeing their faces, of knowing I had done the impossible that carried me through the first hard months of the turnaround. But eventually you wake up and realize that you're still you, ain't. The validation doesn't change the fundamental truth that you spent your entire childhood being. Invisible to the people who were supposed to see you most clearly. The money doesn't erase the memories of being mocked at family dinners, watching your siblings receive praise for the same things you were criticized for, of learning that love in your family was conditional on being something you could never be. The success doesn't repair the damage of growing up believing you were fundamentally flawed. Fundamentally wrong, fundamentally less than. Therapy helped. I started going 2 years after the acquisition, when the adrenaline wore off, and I was left with the reality of what I had built and the cost of how I had built it. My therapist asked me once what I would say to my parents if I could say anything without consequences. I thought about it for weeks. Finally, I said, I would tell them that I forgive them for not seeing me, but I will never forgive them for making me believe I wasn't worth seeing. She asked if I wanted to actually tell them that. I said no, because they still wouldn't understand. And I had wasted enough of my life trying to make them understand things they were fundamentally incapable of understanding. So I let it go. Not the hurt, exactly. You don't let go of that kind of hurt. But I let go of the need for them to acknowledge it. I let go of the fantasy that someday they would apologize, would recognize what they had done, would see me. I built a life where I didn't need them to see me, because I saw myself. That was enough. The company continued to grow. We expanded into international markets, opened facilities in 6 countries, created 10,000 jobs, paid out millions in profit sharing to employees who had stuck with us through the transformation. We became the case study, the proof of concept, the example other companies pointed to when they wanted to justify doing the right thing. And yes, I took satisfaction in that. In knowing that every article written about our success was another reminder to my family of what they had missed, of what they had dismissed, of what they had lost. But the real satisfaction came from the work itself. From the engineer who told me that working at Ashford had renewed his faith in manufacturing, from the single mother who used her profit-sharing bonus to buy a house, from the intern who said she wanted to be like me when she grew up, not because of the money, but because we built things that mattered. That was the legacy my grandfather had wanted me to build. Not revenge, not vindication, but meaning. I'm 42 now, 15 years since that dinner, 10 years since the acquisition. I still sit in the office that used to be James's, still look out at the factory floor that my grandfather built, still make decisions that affect thousands of lives. But I also do something my father never did, something James never understood. I listen. To the people on the factory floor, to the engineers with crazy ideas, to the employees who see problems and want to fix them. I remember what it felt like to have ideas dismissed, to be told my perspective didn't matter, to be invisible in my own family. and I make sure that no one who works for me ever feels that way. That's the real ending to this story. Not the moment of triumph at the dinner table, but the daily choice to build something different from what I inherited. To create a company culture where people are valued for who they are, not just what they produce. Where innovation comes from listening, not commanding. Where success is measured not just in profit margins, but in lives improved. My grandfather was right. I didn't have what it took to run Ashford Industries the way it had always been run, with ruthlessness, and hunger, and a willingness to sacrifice everything for profit. But I had what it took to build something better. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. The invitation to my parents' 40th anniversary dinner still sits in my desk drawer. I open it sometimes when I need to remember, not the pain, but the moment I chose myself over their approval. The moment I stopped asking for their permission to be who I was. Next to it, I keep my grandfather's letter. The one that saw me when no one else did. The one that gave me permission to build something real. And beside that, a photo from last year's company picnic. 700 employees and their families gathered on the lawn outside the factory. In the center of the photo, barely visible in the crowd, is me. No throne, no head of table, just another person in the group, part of something larger than myself. That's the empire I built. Not one of dominance, but one of contribution. Not one of taking, but one of creating. And every time someone asks me about that night at the dinner, about how I felt when I told them I had bought their company, I tell them the truth. I felt free. Free from the need for their approval, free from the weight of their expectations, free from the cage of being the Ashford they wanted instead of the person I actually was. They told me I would get nothing. They were right. I got everything instead.